If you invested $10,000 into Intel stock 10 years ago, you would have $17,809 today. In other words, you would have gotten a return on investment of 78.09%. That's a pretty pedestrian return for a tech stock like Intel. So how did Intel get here? I'm going to talk about that in this video, as well as answer if investors today should buy Intel stock for the next decade. All right, so let's get into the details. Starting with Intel's revenue growth on a quarterly basis, going back the decade, you can see the first part of the decade, Intel was doing a nice job increasing sales at a robust rate, culminating at an over 20% growth rate right at the onset of the pandemic. And since then, the growth rate has been decelerating and turning negative and finishing with negative 31.6% in its most recent quarter. Which makes sense, right? If you think about it, when we were sent home during the pandemic to work and to learn from home, we all needed to have a computer. That means instead of just having one computer per household, we needed one computer per household member. So the number of computers that were purchased during the early stages of the pandemic exploded and increased exponentially. And what's happening now is that when people buy a computer, that typically lasts them from 4 to 6 years, depending on how heavily you use it and the degree of updates you're going to need based on your profession. So during 2020 and 2021, there was a lot of computers purchased, and so that created a gap at 2022 and now in 2023 when fewer and fewer people need to upgrade their computers. And this is going to be the case likely until 2024, 2025, 2026, really when Intel will experience a nice rebound in sales when those computers that were purchased during the early stages of the pandemic need to be upgraded. And look at the impact of net income for Intel Corporation in the most recent year. Look at the trailing 12-month net income collapsed from over 24 billion down to 8 billion, and this was after the company had done a nice job boosting its net income from around $10 billion all the way up to 24 billion, but then in the aftermath of the economic reopening and in the aftermath of all that buildup of household computers, now the amount of purchases are decreasing, and that's decreasing Intel Corporation's net income. And you could see that coincides with Intel's stock price decline here. Ever since the revenue growth and net profit started to decrease, Intel's stock has started to decrease. It was up over 240% at one point looking back in the last decade, but that had come down to the 78% we talked about in the beginning of this video. So it all makes sense, right? There is justification for why Intel stock is down off its highs and why the profitability is down and why revenue growth is down. It's all makes sense, and it's not to blame Intel for any of what happened. People just pulled forward all of the computer purchases they were going to need to make in 2020 and 2021, and so that's creating a gap in 2022, 2023, and likely in 2024, while people just continue using the computers that they bought and they're not going to need to upgrade those. So is Intel stock a buy for the next decade? If you're thinking about buying and holding Intel stock for the next decade, is it a good time to buy it? Well, it's trading at a price to free cash flow of 16, which is around the higher end where it's traded at in the last 3 years. And if we look at in the last 5 years, it's about the average valuation it has traded for in the last 5 years. But if you remember what we talked about the computers and the refresh cycle being 4 to 6 years, knowing that and knowing that the refresh cycle is not going to start until 2024 at the earliest, I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. Visit fool.com/parkev for the 10 best stocks to buy now. I wouldn't want to buy Intel stock right now. I would want to wait until maybe early 2024 or mid to late 2024 to consider buying Intel stock when it's got closer proximity to the refresh cycle. Because right now there's going to be a gap between sales and those that need to be refreshed. So I wouldn't be buying it right now. I would wait, at least a couple of quarters before I started considering Intel stock again. All right, so that's all I've got for this video. As always, I truly appreciate your viewership, and I've hand selected a few videos that I think you'll enjoy. Please click on one of those, and I'll see you over there. Thank you for watching.